Hi. Lately I've been getting pretty deep in animation, and I thought it'd be fun to make some videos recreating cool effects from anime. Today I'm going to have a go at recreating the magical barrier from Frieren. It's not too complicated and it's got a cool and distinct style, so I think it'd be a great place to start. I'm going to include the assets I'm using as well as the macro we make at the end in a free public Patreon post if you want to follow along, but I encourage you to use your own assets too. We're going to be using Davinci Fusion for these effects. While this isn't intended to be a tutorial for Davinci Fusion as a whole, I'm going to try to make this easy to follow along. Before we get started, we need to outline the specifics of what the barrier in Frieren looks like. First, the barrier tends to be made up of hexagons that are slightly transparent and have a bluish tint with a subtle shimmer effect, and has a soft glow around the edges. Second, the shape that makes up the barrier has a consistent border with a sharp edge. Third, the barrier flashes when objects strike it. And fourth, the barrier is built procedurally. The network of adjacent shapes fills in over time rather than all at once. Some of these effects are best done pre-composite, like the shapes themselves filling in over time, and some are best done as separate effects, like the impacts. So for the goal of this effect, we're going to try to focus on the border, the color, the glow, the transparency, and the shimmer. Let's start by opening a new fusion composition like this. Next, we'll prepare our media. I like to start with a background node set to my resolution, then set up a multi-merge and input my different assets in on top of the initial background node. To keep track of things easier, we'll rename different nodes by pressing F2. I'd recommend doing this for other important nodes as we go along. Next, between the multi-merge and the media out, we'll add another regular merge node with the apply mode set to hard light and the blend set to 0.5. Since I want to be able to easily apply this effect onto whatever I want, I'm going to use only one element to build on, the hexagon pattern. I'll drop this into my node graph near the top and plug it into the merge node. Then I'll add a color correct node after it so I can change the colors later on if I want. Make sure to tick pre-divide in the options tab. To make the border on the hexagons, I'm going to add an erode dilate node and plug the color corrector into it. I'll slide the amount value up until it looks right. If it gets too big, it starts to look weird, so it's best to keep it on the thinner side. I like to set the filter type to circle. Add another color correct node with pre-divide ticked. After the dilate nodes, we can change the colors of those as well. You'll want to increase the contrast to 3. Otherwise the border will be almost totally transparent when we add it to the rest of the composition. Go ahead and make another merge node. Put the color corrected dilate into the yellow input and the first color corrector into the green input. You can refine the dilate amount to get it looking how you like. For slight holographic shimmer, I think it's a toss up between using a noise gradient and a plasma node. For this example, we'll go with the noise gradient. Add a new merge node with the blend set to 0.5 and a noise gradient. Plug the previous merge into the new and drag out the output of the hexagon color corrector into the blue slot on the new merge. This will make it so the noise only affects the hexagons. I found that setting the detail to 1.5, the contrast to 3.5, the scale to 8, and the seed to around 0.25 match the look of the shimmer in Frieren. In the gradient tab, I set it to 2 color and used a soft bluish for the first color and a white for the second. Just about any blue seems to work. Now we can add a glow node after the merge. I like to use the glow from the tools dropdown rather than the open effects one because it's a bit more straightforward, but you can choose whatever you like. I think keeping the effect more subtle matches Frieren a bit more. Finally, plug it all into the merge we made earlier. There might be other ways to get this effect, but I think this results in a pretty customizable solution pretty effectively. If you want to reuse this effect without having to redo these steps each time, we can make a macro. Before you make a macro, note that any settings your nodes have will be the default settings whenever you add the macro later on. It's probably a good idea to set all the color correction settings to default, aside from the contrast on the borders. Select all the nodes between the original hexagon input and the merge node. Then right click on the node and select macro, create macro. This window has all the various options and settings for each of the nodes. We just want to control a few things though. The hexagon colors, the border thickness and colors, the glow intensity and color, and perhaps the scale and speed of the noise gradient. Go ahead and collapse all the dropdowns. If you've been renaming your nodes, it'll make finding the relevant settings a bit easier. For the hexagon's color correct node, we'll want to enable wheel 1 options and make sure an input is enabled too. For the erode dilate node, enable X amount. For the border color corrector, enable all the wheel 1 options as well, and enable master RGB contrast too. For the noise gradient, enable the seed rate and speed and scale. Detail and contrast are optional, but are probably worth adding. Barrier glow should have glow size and glow enabled. Go ahead and set the name of the macro, that's what the node will be called when added to the graph, and click the 3 dots and choose Save As to save the macro. To use it, just right click anywhere in the node graph space and choose Add Tool Macro, then the macro you just made. And that's it for this one. Do you think mine looks close enough to Frieren's? Do you think this would be helpful in your own work? Did you get any ideas for making your own effects from this? Let me know in the comments. If you have any suggestions for anime effects to try recreating, let me know as well. Thanks for watching, and I hope I'll see you next time.